Hello everybody, I have decided that I will be making a video talking about World War II tanks. Now, when I was deciding what game I should use the footage on, as you can see I decided on War Thunder, since the games I have been playing, like Doom Eternal, I don't really think that Doom footage would go well over me talking about tanks. So you see, it's Tiger 2P it was a tank that was a prototype of a tank. So yeah, I decided to end up using War Thunder footage since I have tons of that piling up in the background. So, the first tanks that I'll be talking about is the M10. Now, my opinion on the M10 is that it was a decent tank destroyer. It did good at its job, sort of. But it didn't have a top, whereas an open top tank that made it vulnerable to grenades and stuff. However, the crews did attempt to fix that, but where it also had a thinner turret armor and a low turret turn speed, wasn't that good of a tank. Now, it was still decent, don't get me wrong, it was still decent, and there's a reason why it was used throughout a good chunk of the war. But it was sort of a worse tank in my opinion. No, worse, I don't know. But that's my opinion on the M10. Now, the next tank that I'll be talking about, if you can sort of call it a tank, is the AA variant of the Sherman. I don't really know what to say about it. It's an AA Sherman. Some AA's better than no AA. Just slap an AA turret onto a Sherman chassis and bam, you have the AA Sherman. Not very much to say here. I don't even know if it classifies as a tank, but I have videos of this I'll put in. Now, the next tanks I'll be talking about is the Tiger 2P. Or not 2P, it's the Tiger 2. I just have the Tiger 2P since I don't have the H unlocked. The Tiger 2P was the test variant. They're similar, but are slightly different, so sorry about using the wrong tank in footage. Now, my opinion on Tiger 2 is that it was actually sort of a bad tank. Now, its armor was very good, and its gun was extremely good for anti-tank purposes. I mean, it's a long 88mm. You can't go wrong with that if you're going up against our tanks. However, there is one problem with it, in my opinion. That is just that it's way too heavy for its transmission and engine. It had very unreliable transmissions and engine problems that would cause it to fail a lot. And it just cost Germany way too many resources to make. But that won't be as big as a problem as the next tanks that I will be talking about, which is the Jagdtiger. Now, the Jagdtiger is probably, in my opinion, one of the best scenes to show what was the problem with most German heavy tanks during World War II. It's just they were just way too heavy for their transmission and engine. Now, the Jagdtiger, if I'm remembering it correctly, has a 105mm gun, which is extremely powerful, but it has the one problem of being just way too big for all the other tanks at the time period. I mean, you fire this thing at a Sherman, and it's probably going to overpen the Sherman. It's definitely overkill for a Sherman. Now, if the war lasted a little bit longer, and stuff like the American T-34 were to actually arrive, or stuff like the IS-3, then there'd probably be precedent for its gun being that big. But that, combined with the increased armor on top of the Tiger 2, not P, but on top of the Tiger 2, just makes it way too heavy, almost impossible to transport on trains. Thus, they had slimmed down side armors, that way they could fit down on trains and stuff. and whenever they attempt driving it, they'd have a tendency to get stuck and end up breaking down. But its front armor was basically impenetrable. But where they did have to slim down side armor, it would allow stuff like the Shermans that had the bigger guns. I think it's the 76mm, I think? I don't know. I think it's 76mm. Whatever's a gun that they upgunned the Sherman to in the Sherman Fireflies, that gun, that allows those Shermans and stuff like the M18 to flank and kill it from the side. Now, I don't even know if this classifies as a tank, but I just want to put the Schnitzer launcher in there. It is a early German World War II artillery gun, self-propelled artillery. It's good for artillery. Really bad armor though. But you don't really have to worry about that when it's artillery. Plus it was repurposed Czechoslovakian vehicle, so I don't know. Just good for artillery. I just want to put it in there for reasons. I don't know. Now, the next vehicle is Tiger E. Now, the Tiger E did not nearly have the transmission engines as the King Tiger or the Jag Tiger. However, it was still slightly too heavy, I think, for its engine, and it would still have transmission problems and slight engine problems. The main problems I have with the Tiger E is that, in my opinion, it was just an inefficient use of resources. I mean, the regular 88mm are very good for dealing with tanks and very good armor. However, it does have the problem where it's a heavy tank. It just took so much materials to make it that, in my opinion, it was sort of a waste, because you could have used those materials to make different vehicles and more of those different vehicles that would have been better, instead of combining all of those metals and stuff into just one big heavy Tiger 1. But the Tiger 1's gun and armor was still good, so decent tank, just took too much to produce, in my opinion. Now, the next tank is Panzers, or Panzer. No, I can't pronounce the TH sound, no matter how hard I try. So I think it's Panzers, but it might be the Panzer. Pretty sure it's Panzer. The Panzer tanks that came after the Panzer IV, but they're not Panzer IV variant. The ones on screen right now. Now, these things, I don't know much about them and their history and how they performed and stuff. But from the little bit I have seen, they had the problem of most German tanks of being slightly too heavy for their armor. But other than that, I don't really know much about them. Really, the main reason why I'm just including them is because I have footage from them since they're my 6.0 German loadout, so might as well put them in here. So, yeah. The main problem with them, in my opinion, would probably be just, once again, slightly inefficient usage of resources, I think. Since, from the little bit I do know, the Panzer series, alright, it's Panzer series, but this variant of the Panzer tanks really didn't do that good. I mean, it did do decent, but compared to something like Panzer IV, Stug, or the Jag Panzers, it wasn't very as good as them, so yeah. Plus, might as well just put them in here. Besides, we need footage of the Pershing destroying a tank. Now, the next up is the Panzer G1. I don't actually know if it's G1 IRL for its name. I'm just using War Star name for it, since there's multiple Panzers and this one looks different significantly from the other one. So, this is the one that, if I'm remembering correctly, never lost one tank due to enemy tank engagement. I am probably wrong. Make sure to do some research on that and check and let me know if I'm wrong or not in the comments, because I am definitely wrong about that, probably. But it has a very good gun. It has a long German 88mm. Very good armor. And it was light enough that its transmission wasn't constantly breaking down. The problem that I have with it is whereas I don't have any problems with it. It just was introduced too late in the war. It was pretty decent. It was lighter than something like Tiger 2P, introduced late in the war. Very good armor. Very good frontal gun. I don't know. Don't worry, I have a problem with it. It's just decent all-around tank. Just came too late into the war for Germany to actually be able to use it to any extent that would have actually helped it out a good bit. Now, the next tank is the tank destroyer known as the Nashorn. It was pretty decent in my opinion, very good gun. It has the German long 88mm again. It appears a lot in this video, I know. But the main problem with the Nashorn is that, as you can see, it just has no armor on it. Just no armor whatsoever. Now, what would be the good thing about this is that it has some decent range, and as it was instructed to the troops, is to basically use it to snipe other tanks, use its range advantage, snipe other tanks, and take out tanks from a long distance away, and try not to engage in close quarters. The problem with it that I have is just that it has like no armor at all. Just no armor. Infantry come up along sides, just swarm it, shoot the crew, throw a grenade in there. Other tanks could just one-shot it with something like an HE shell. Yeah, just way too little armor. Now, the next tank, if you can recall it, the tank, is the Puma, otherwise known as the SDKFZ 252, I think? Maybe? No, it's one of the it's one of the SDKs, these variant scenes. The German half-track, it's one of those variants of it. Basically, they just took off the tracks on the back, slapped on wheels, added a tank turret, helped add slightly more armor. Bam! You got a new vehicle. I don't even know if it classifies as a tank or if it's an armored car or something like that. I don't know. All I know is that I have footage of it. Plus, I really like it. I mean, it's the Puma. It's the fast tank. It's the speedy boy. What's not to like about it? It's very fast. Has a decent small gun, but, I mean, it's from a German half-track. You can't be putting something like the long 88mm or the 88mm on there. So, it has a pretty decent gun for what you could put on it. Has a couple machine guns, good for anti-infantry purposes. Or at least it is in games like Hell Let Loose. I think it would be decent for anti-infantry purposes. It'd be decent for infantry support. And it'd be a decent stopgap vehicle, which those are good for. That says if the enemy pushes a hole in your lines, and they will break through your lines, and there's a hole that opens up, stopgap vehicles can be vehicles that rush in there, help out. It could be pretty decent at doing that. In terms on tank combat, well, I don't even know if this word classifies as a tank or not, but it could very easily do what the M18 could do and just flanks the sides and shoot them. Or it could end up using it to end up scouting out enemy positions, stuff like that. Yuri's the main problem is that it's a half track. I don't even know if it's a tank or not. Honestly, don't know how many times I said that. Oh well. Yeah, that's the main problem with this one. It's just that it has, like, no armor. Other than that, pretty decent. Nice, fast. I mean, it's half track. Next up, one of my favorite tanks. The Panzer IV, otherwise known as the Tiger I's little brother. Now this, I honestly think is a really, really good tank. It was able to be upgunned and stuff a whole lot throughout the war. The earlier variants had pretty decent HE shell for taking out infantry. Has a pretty decent armor-piercing explosive, armor-piercing high explosive round, a PHE round. I think that's the round that has. Might be high explosive armor-piercing. But that round that has is pretty decent at taking out our tanks, whereas they will be upgunned throughout the war. They will be kept up with the firepower, and in terms of effectiveness, is able to be supplied to troops relatively easily. And I'd basically consider it the German counterpart to something like the Sherman. Nice, pretty decent German infantry support vehicle. Just good tank. Now the problem is that Germany couldn't produce enough of these scenes. But that comes down to its factories, not the tank. Well, I'm pretty sure it's factories. I don't think this tank was extremely overcomplicated to produce like other German tanks were. Probably was though. But still, pretty decent. Now, as you've seen in the last clip, I've been experimenting with my editing software and I now know how to control the powers of time. But let's get back to talk about tanks. Now, the tank on your screen right now that you can see is the Stug 3. I think that is a pretty good tank. If I remember correctly, it had one of the highest kill-death ratios of the entire war, meaning that per Stug that was killed, that Stug killed a bunch of enemy tanks. And I think that this one had one of the higher numbers of KD ratios throughout the entire war, if I'm remembering it correctly. Now, the Stug was pretty decent. Had decent armor, pretty easy to mass produce. It was originally it was a modified variant of another Czechoslovakian tank that Germany took in, but it proved so useful that the troops kept demanding more and more of them, that it ended up getting mass produced, and yeah. It has a Pak 45 as its main gun, which is pretty good to early war tank. I mean, it's able to penetrate stuff like the T-34, and it's able to end up fighting off the French Char-2-1, Char-2B? Pretty sure that's French tank. I don't know much about French tanks. I do know that that's one of the early French tanks that Germany was expected to struggle against. But, had pretty decent gun, pretty good armor for the time period, and yeah. Plus, if I'm remembering the video from the Tank Museum correctly, it said that had a gun that could go on the turret ring that was like one of the machine guns on top of like the Sherman or something that you could put onto the cupola, which the cupola is the commander's hatch. Now, you may have noticed that I have forgotten a bunch of nations in here that also had tanks. Well, you see, I don't really have them grinded up in War Thunder any. Plus, this video is already 20 minutes long, so... And that's just at time of recording it, you know, I have even more footage put in here, so... I'm just gonna go rapid fire over some of the nations that I missed. So, we will start Well, as soon as I've been selected, Great Britain. I think that they were pretty decent overall in terms of tanks, just didn't have the factories and stuff to produce many of them. The Churchill was one of my favorite tanks, so specifically the Churchill Crocodile, in my opinion, was potentially the best tank of the war. I mean, a Churchill was a flamethrower, it already has decent armor. Japan has problems that they just didn't have the materials or anything. All their tanks or light tanks have like no armor. China has the problem of having bought most of their tanks from our nations until recently, and this isn't a discussion about modern tanks, it's a discussion about World War II tanks. Italy has the problem of their over-reliance on tankettes, and France has the problem of... You see, France has the problem of they just got taken out too early in the war. The Shard 2 B1, I think this is the tank there. It was pretty decent for an early war tank. The main problem that it had was just French higher up command not really wanting to utilize it and them getting all their forces surrounded at Dunkirk. So, yeah, that's the main problem that France had during World War II. Just not enough time to produce tanks. It is pretty cool though, in my opinion, that France was able to start working on the AMX line of tanks while they were captured under Nazi occupation. They worked on these by disguising them as tractors. So yeah. And then Sweden, the final war thunder nation, most of their tanks were bought, and other than that, well, I mean, it's Sweden. They didn't really see much combat. And for the finish line of tanks inside of Sweden, there's the problem with that Finland never really used their tanks since they really just didn't have them. So, yeah. Now, I'm gonna go and get some more footage for Russian tanks and for the Sherman, since my footage for the Sherman got deleted and it was my Russian tanks. Alright, so it is the next day, and I just finished recording the video for the rest of the tanks I was going to talk about. So, we're starting off with this one with the M4A1, otherwise known as just the regular Sherman. Now, you see, here's a common misconception. The M1A1 Sherman's gun is not meant for tank-on-tank combat. It is more of a infantry support gun and early World War II tank anti-tank gun, since 75mm was what was on the Shard 2 CB, and that was for anti-tank purposes in early World War II, but it also has a very good HE shell, which was used for anti-infantry purposes and to do stuff like take out anti-tank emplacements and take out artillery. So you see, that's the first common misconception about the Sherman. Now, the Sherman, in my opinion, is one of the best tanks of the entire war. Now you see, I will explain this reasoning to you. Now, the Sherman had decent turret traversal speed, but I mean, a bunch of our tanks have listed here at decent turret traversal speed, just as good, if not better than Sherman. Here's what I think makes the Sherman so good. It is great at dealing with infantry. Something that stuff like the Tiger 8, or not Tiger H1, the Tiger 1 was not good at. I mean, it still has machine guns, so it can do that, and it's decent at supporting infantry. But the Long 88 doesn't have that good of an HE board. I mean, it has an HE board that's pretty decent, but I mean, it's not that good. It's more of an anti-tank purpose role in a heavy tank. While something like the Sherman It is way better for helping out with the infantry, with taking out other infantry, and emplacements in different stuff. Number two, other than that, I think that the turn's pretty decent because it was decently reliable. I mean, there are some issues here and there, but I mean, it's it's one of the most reliable tanks of war made because it's medium tank. I mean that all medium tanks are decently reliable, other than a few. Plus, it was actually not too heavy for its transmission stuff, unlike the German tanks I was covering earlier. So, the Sherman has one thing that I think puts it way above all the other tanks that I've covered so far as well. It has really decent crew comfortability for a tank. Now, I'm guessing that the Tiger had decent crew comfortability since it's his heavy tank. And stuff like the Yag Panzer or Yag Tiger, they were just big enough that they had decent crew comfort as well. But I mean, the Sherman is, from what I've seen, has been ranked as one of the best tanks in terms of crew comfort. Now that I finally got in the Sherman den, now it's time to move on to the T-34. Now, you see, the T-34 has many problems in my opinion. Number one, while I admit it has a pretty decent gun, especially where it's up gun throughout the entire war, it has the problem of the Soviets having heat treated their armor at way too high of a temperature, which would make it so whenever a bullet would hit it, if the bullet did not pen it, but it ended up hitting the tank at high enough speed, the tank's armor would end up cracking open and the back plate of the armor would break off, sending little chunks of metal all around the tank, sometimes killing the crew. Which is not very good. The other thing that I really do not like about the T-34 is the fact that it has like no crew comfort. Now, the Sherman and the T-34 are really the only tanks I'm going to mention crew comfort on, just because they're complete opposite sides of the spectrum, not including stuff like the Italian L3, since, yeah, tank gets like the L3 are the worst in terms of crew comfort. But the T-34 is a close second in terms of worst crew comfort, in my opinion. Now, another thing that T-34 didn't really have that good of a thing of was the transmission. Now, it had a pretty good engine, but the transmission was so stiff that they couldn't really go into forced gear, which is a little bit of a problem if you want to go fast in the T-34. But, other than that, the T-34 was a sort of decent tank. I mean, it had a decent gun, especially as they upgunned it. And, yeah. Sort of decent at infantry support. It could have used better HE bullets, in my opinion, but the Russians had lots of other tanks that covered that role. So, yeah. Speaking of Russian tanks that sort of covered that role, while the KV-2 was meant for more of a bunker-busting tank, it could be used for infantry support role. The problem with the KV-2 is that it has such slow turn speed that infantry, especially during the Finnish war when Finland was defending against Russia, were able to just swarm the tank, and where most all Russian tanks had very unreliable hatches, the Finns were able to deal with the Russian tanks by doing stuff like throwing Molotov cocktails underneath tanks, or just sticking flamethrowers around the tanks to burn out the crew. Now, that's sort of a problem that all Russian tanks had, special ones that had slow turn speed, like the KV2. But the KV2 does have one good thing going for it, and that's just how big of a gun an HE bullet it has. And the reason for that is for bunker busting. Thus, its tank-on-tank combat stuff was alright. I mean, if a tank gets hit by a bullet that's meant to destroy concrete bunkers, then the tank is probably going to get destroyed 9 chances out of 10. But other than that, yeah, I mean, it's the Russian fridge. Next up is the KV-1. I don't really know much about the KV-1, since most all the stuff I've tried to find about the KV-1 was instead about the T-34, since the KV-1 got very rapidly overshadowed by the T-34. But, I mean, the KV-1 was a pretty decent tank. It had a decent gun for both anti-tank and anti-infantry purposes. But it had the same problem as the T-34 of having its armor heat treated at way too high of a level. Plus, during stuff like the Russian-Finnish War, then, yeah, it once again had the problem with the unreliable hatches and being vulnerable to infantry just swarming around it. But what tank isn't vulnerable to infantry swarming around it? So, yeah. Well, there's one final tank for me to talk about, and that tank is the almighty one of the Russian tractors. Now, the Russian tractors I'm talking about is the Ziz. That is the name of this vehicle. It is Ziz. That's its name. Now you see, this tank, the Ziz, there's some numbers after the Ziz part, but I forgot the numbers, so I'm just gonna call it Ziz. This tank was, if you could call it a tank, was built on top of Russian tractors that were modified during the Nazi invasion of Russia. They ended up putting tractors together with anti-tank guns on top of them to make this. Now, you see, the problem with this tank is that it has, like, no armor. The good thing about this tank is that it has a pretty big anti-tank gun. And it's also pretty fast. This means that just as long as the tank didn't have infantry support, it could theoretically go around and flank tanks and be able to shoot the tanks from behind. Now, what was the point of this video? I don't know. I guess I was planning on making this show on how there really wasn't any good World War II tanks, but I mean, during making this I realized that there was a bunch of good World War II tanks. Thus, well, since that was the end of this video, I hope that you guys have a good day. While I was making this video, I learned that there's actually a bunch of good World War II tanks. Even though I set out to make this video that there really wasn't as many good World War II tanks. Yeah, proved myself wrong in my own video. Well, hope you guys have a good day, and bye.